This is Some Assembly Required, a podcast hosted by the Wisconsin Assembly Democratic Caucus discussing what's happening in the state capitol and all things Wisconsin. I'm your host, Assembly Democratic Leader Gordon Hintz, representing the 54th Assembly District and the city of Oshkosh. Well, today's podcast is coming after a tragic weekend here in the U.S. with both mass shootings in El Paso and Dayton, Ohio, that saw 22 victims in El Paso and 9 victims in Ohio. You know, the public should have an expectation to feel safe in their community. And too often, for too long, they've been represented by lawmakers who don't even discuss some of the most basic steps to address this public health epidemic. And I think it's time that we have leaders see what we can ultimately do instead of just using the buzzwords or making up excuses about video game violence or bad movies, the types of things that happen in other countries, but they don't experience mass shootings at the level that we do. Assembly Democrats have been advocating for years, and especially in recent sessions, to move forward with common sense gun safety reform that is increasingly supported by the public. You've heard us supporting Attorney General Josh Kaul to implement a red flag law, which would be a lethal violence protection order, which would intervene when an individual is at risk to themselves or others. In other words, keeping guns out of the hands of those who might be most likely to harm themselves or other people. We should have universal background checks to close the gun show loophole, which allows violent criminals and others who shouldn't possess firearms to be able to obtain those without going through the required federal background check that is utilized for those that are regulated by the federal government. And obviously restoring the 48-hour waiting period for all firearm purchases. This was something that was law for more than 30 years in Wisconsin, to have a cooling off period so those that wanted to run out and hurt themselves or others, would have time to hopefully think about it, maybe get some help. And we've seen that has been effective, in other states at reducing the number of suicides. And it's something that we should seriously consider when we look at what are things that government can do to intervene. The reality is the early responses, I think the leadership in Wisconsin under Republican Speaker Robin Vos is not interested. Don't think that there's anything we should be doing. And that's too bad. I'm not saying that we can solve this problem with a magic wand, but I think the public has an expectation that government should do everything possible to minimize and reduce the likelihood of these types of mass shootings, which are becoming far too common. A year ago, after the Parkland shooting in Florida, Assembly Democrats pushed the universal background check bill to close the loophole, something that 97% of Americans support. Yet every single Republican in the state assembly voted against it. Back to issues that we've been advocating for a while. I wanted to talk about the Medicaid issue. Since 2014, Wisconsin Republicans have refused the Medicaid expansion under the Affordable Care Act that have left Wisconsin residents paying an estimated $1.1 billion in federal income taxes to support Medicaid expansion in 37 other states that have taken it. Wisconsin will experience no return on the investments when we give our tax dollars to other states. It's been a short-sighted decision. We know that the Medicaid expansion would expand easy and accessible health care access, would save $324 million in just this budget alone, and allow us to put state taxpayer money into these programs. I am pleased to be joined today by my colleague, Representative Daniel Riemer from the 7th Assembly District in Wisconsin, a longtime healthcare advocate and the author of the standalone bill to take the Medicaid expansion here in Wisconsin. Welcome, Dan.
Great to be here on Some Assembly Required.
Hey, so, you've been an advocate for this, and I think the public gets the general issues here in terms of why this is a good idea. What is it that maybe people don't know, or what would you add to, the basic case, besides expanding healthcare and the cost on, why do you think we should do this, and why do you think we're not?
Well, I think you can summarize the reasons to do it quickly, but it also leads to lots of other reasons to do it. The quick way to describe it is it helps cover more people, tens of thousands of people in the state of Wisconsin who are going without health insurance right now, and it saves the state a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars. The most recent estimate that I saw from our Department of Revenue was that it saves Wisconsin $324 million. So that's the quick version. On top of that, you can talk at length about why more people having access to health insurance is good for their health, good for their financial security, but it's also better for everyone in the state of Wisconsin. It actually helps improve healthcare throughout the state. reduces premiums for people who have private insurance, and frankly, it's just the right thing to do. The second piece of it, the savings point to a lot of other reasons to do it as well. If we save hundreds of millions of dollars, we can make needed investments to fix our roads and streets and bridges. We can improve our schools. We can provide tax relief for the middle class. Oftentimes I think we have debates and we say, well, Democrats stand for this, Republicans oppose this or stand for something else. In this case, I think there is bipartisan support if you look at Democratic voters and Republican voters, constituents who identify as Republican, constituents who identify as Democrats, constituents who identified somewhere in the middle or as something else. People in Wisconsin of all political parties agree with this idea pretty overwhelmingly. About 70% of Wisconsinites support this. It is Republican politicians, specifically those in the Republican leadership here in the Assembly and the Senate, that are against it. Later, as Republicans took control of both houses in Congress and President Trump was in charge, they said, okay, we're gonna repeal this. They didn't do that. I think that proved that the law was here to stay. So the excuses for not doing this have changed, but the small number of people who oppose this have been getting smaller and smaller as we've seen states where Republican governors, Republican legislatures have done this, have done it in a way that makes sense to them. Sometimes they amend it to make it work for their state. I think we could talk about that, but the main idea is still out there. The main point is still this. It covers tens of thousands of additional people in the state. It saves us hundreds of millions of dollars. It's the right thing to do.
Well said on a number of fronts. I continually say that it's never too late to take this money that we've been debating and obviously missed out on over since 2014. And so thank you for your continued advocacy of that. And hopefully, we'll see the legislature come around and that's something that we can get done. I wanted to come back a little bit, do a profile, let people know a little bit about you. And so you were elected in 2012. Do you remember the exact moment you decided to run for state assembly?
Not really. I've always, I know I was in law school at the time and I took a leave of absence to run for office. I wish I could point to a single moment. I think I can say safely that, growing up in the city of Milwaukee where I did, you could feel firsthand, even though my parents were middle-class people who had jobs, just how difficult it was for the kids that I grew up with whose parents, whose families struggled to find work, who had work but were not getting paid enough. The older I got, the more of America I got to see. The more I realized that we really are I think the greatest nation on earth. We produce together a lot of wealth and prosperity. The way that government works the wrong way to make sure that it only benefits the rich, I thought was fundamentally wrong. I think the government should do at least just as much to make sure that middle-class people, working people trying to get work benefit too. And that's why I got involved in politics and ran for office.
Can you tell us, what do you like most about, serving in the state assembly, and what do you maybe not like as much or like the least about serving in the assembly?
I love the long hours. I love being on the floor till 4 in the morning. Love a job where you can go home at 4:30 in the morning. It's a fascinating job. We get to deal with really interesting issues. The hope is that those issues at the end of the day really help people get a job, help people who are working put a little bit more in their pocket and take home, and that benefits them and their family. Make sure people get health insurance and get healthy because they have access to a doctor and to needed health care. Make sure kids can go to good schools and achieve what they can based on what they're interested in. So when we can help people, I think it's really a special job when we get to work on interesting issues. And there are some perks. We get to meet cool people. I met Bonnie Blair, the gold Olympic skater,
absolutely,
speed skater.
Hero.
kind of hometown hero. I think
Yeah.
she's from West Dallas or nearby.
What about least? Would it be the hours that you mentioned at the beginning, or I'll let you off the hook if you want to tell us what's something that maybe the public doesn't know, or what do you think the biggest misunderstanding, or maybe the biggest surprise between before you were in office, now that after you're in office, that maybe people don't know about the job?
No, I think broadly speaking, I could say that my least favorite part is when some aspects of the cynicism that gets into the work, whether that's from people I talk to that I represent, because people can get cynical, not without good reason in some cases, if we're being honest. And sometimes the people we work with appear to be doing things for cynical reasons, not with the best interest of the people of the state of Wisconsin in mind. And then when that starts to seep into your way of thinking, I'm always trying to fight against that. And so that's one of the aspects of the job I try to avoid and really keep my focus on what's best for the people I represent and what's best for the people in Wisconsin.
And I think that's a real challenge for a lot of people in politics in general. Briefly, why don't you tell us what else are you working on? You've obviously been involved in healthcare. You've done some work on behalf of veterans in the past. What about this session? What are your goals for the rest of the session? What are some of the things you're working on?
Sure. Yeah. In addition to expanding Medicaid, we were pleased to see some of the bills or at least ideas that were present in bills we worked on in the past, present in the governor's budget. A bit of growth for something called the Transitional Jobs Program, which helps people who have a hard time finding employment, often because of barriers that make it difficult for them to get work, get access to jobs for 6 months, which more often than not help connect them to the private sector. Takes a little bit of government resources, but mostly relies on that relationship between worker and employer, just to give people a chance to get back into the workforce, inspired largely by the New Deal, Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal, but I think an idea that has stood the test of time and still helps people get access to work. Pleased to see that initially proposed in the budget. Part of it was kept intact, hoping that we can keep working to help more people who still struggle to find work, even though, knock on wood, the economy has been doing well, and in some cases, although not always doing well for working people, but generally speaking, when the economy's doing well and everybody benefits, that's good. But there are still folks out there who struggle to find work. Also, legislation to try to provide tax relief to middle-class people, working people who don't make very much, something called the Earned Income Tax Credit, boosts wages, simply gives a tax cut to people who don't make very much money but are working.
Great. Well, look forward to hopefully seeing some movement on some of those things and values that you've been advocating, not just this session, but in the past. Well, on Some Assembly Required, we are at the point where we like to provide a little more, detail, not just on government, that tells us a little bit about just who serves in the legislature and, what they're all about. So we're going to go with something called the speed round.
Yeah.
And, one or the other.
Oh.
Not too much elaboration, but you can save it maybe for a couple of them. So
okay.
we're gonna mix it up a little bit.
All right.
Squeaky cheese curds or fried cheese curds?
Squeaky, definitely.
Manchester United or Manchester City?
Oh, I have to say City because I just hate United so much more than I hate City.
That's the right answer. Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo?
I hate to say that it's Ronaldo because
it's just hard to say.
I hate because it's very hard to say.
All right, we'll get some tougher ones a little closer to home. Brett Favre or Aaron Rodgers? They're both American heroes, but one of them you have to choose.
Aaron Rodgers.
Julius Caesar or King Lear?
As a player,
I'm going to go with as a play. See, I had to test you. I know you're a Shakespeare guy.
Cowards die many times before their deaths. The valiant never taste of death but once is a line from Julius Caesar. The superior play, in my opinion.
All right. Man bun or capri pants?
Man, which is better or worse?
Which is slightly more preferable?
I've rocked both in my time.
That was not the answer.
But a man bun
You're going to have to edit that.
Man bun is better.
Cleveland or
Because
Sacramento?
a Viking can wear a man bun. Like a true.
Not
like,
the man buns I've seen.
Okay, all right.
Cleveland or Sacramento?
Never been to either.
You got to choose one.
guess-
Where would you rather live?
I guess Cleveland, like Milwaukee.
Mac or PC?
Mac.
Taco Bell or Taco John's?
Taco. Which one's Taco John's? Is that the one in Madison?
Boy, that is a national chain.
I guess Taco Bell then.
Stones or Beatles?
Beatles.
Beatles or Zeppelin?
Beatles.
Beatles or Elvis?
The Beatles.
Beatles or Springsteen?
Ooh, Springsteen.
Springsteen or Dylan?
Springsteen.
Okay.
Did I say Beatles are still better than Springsteen, but I like Bruce Springsteen.
Eau Claire or Lacrosse?
Ooh. Oh. That's a good one. Lacrosse by a nose.
Cops or Culver's?
Cops.
As in cops with a K.
Cops.
What is your late night session go-to comfort food?
Chinese food.
Okay. Funnel cake or cream puffs?
Yeah, don't think I've had either. I've had a cream puff. Did you have to edit that? Is that offensive?
No.
Okay.
And who is your favorite James Bond actor?
Ooh, George Lazenby.
Well, that's it. I want to thank my guest, Representative Daniel Riemer from the 7th Assembly District, for being on and talking and answering a lot of questions. We will be back with our next podcast. And just a reminder, you can find this podcast and all of our podcasts available on Apple Podcasts. I'm Gordon Hintz, and we'll be back next time with Some Assembly Required.